New Thursday, we now have parts of Metro Atlanta, North Georgia included in a moderate drought, and also we're seeing drought conditions expanding across Southwest Georgia as well. Joining me now to talk about the impact on the agricultural industry is Dr. Pam Knox, applied climatologist and meteorologist with the University of Georgia and director of the UGA Weather Network. Thank you for joining me today.
Good to be here.
So this is, of course, Dr. Knox, no surprise. It's been a very dry September. What are your takeaways looking at this drought monitor released this morning?
You know, this is usually the driest time of year in Georgia. So from that standpoint, we're not surprised that we're seeing dry conditions. But it has been drier than usual. We've had almost no rain across the state this month. There have been a few scattered showers, but nothing really substantial. And that looks like it's going to last for at least a couple more weeks before we really see a change in the pattern. We'll see some scattered showers continue, but I don't really see much widespread rain in the near future. And, you know, with the sunshine, we're getting temperatures that are above normal as well. And so that's had some impacts. I haven't had to mow my lawn in weeks because my grass just is not growing. And of course, the farmers are depending on that rain to get them through the rest of the harvest season. And so it's very concerning for them.
And big picture, looking at the map, of course, parts of western Metro Atlanta are in that level 1 drought. We've got some in Columbus and Harris County and also Southwest Georgia. Can you talk more about how things have rapidly changed for farmers there?
Well, you might remember that this summer was actually fairly wet. In fact, some farmers had trouble getting into the fields earlier this season because it was so wet that the ground was muddy and they were afraid of getting stuck. But in the last month or so, that has really gone away. We haven't seen much. We certainly haven't seen anything from the tropics. And so, you know, the very dry conditions have led to some problems. The pastures have stopped growing for many livestock producers. And so they're starting to have to feed the winter hay that they were planning to use later this year. Instead, now they're feeding it to their cattle now to keep the cattle in good condition. And they probably will not get a last cutting of hay, which means they're going to probably have to buy some hay over the winter, or they're going to have to get rid of some of their livestock, and that's not a good thing. If we look at some of the other crops, most of the corn has been harvested already. That's an early crop, and so less problems with that, although if late planted corn is still having some issues. Cotton also is getting near the harvest point. They actually like it pretty dry when they're harvesting because that makes the cotton fluff better marketable. Probably the biggest crop that's having issues right now is peanuts because peanuts they're still filling out the pods, are starting to harvest some of the crops. Peanut harvesting is a two-step process. The first step is to take those peanut plants and turn them upside down. And when they do that, then the nuts all come to the surface. But when it's this dry, the ground is crusty and it's very hard to get those peanuts up out of the ground and turn them over. And so they lose a lot of the nuts. And of course, you know, by doing that, they lose a lot of their yield. And some of the crops that are not quite as far along, the peanuts still need moisture to fill those pods, and that's not happening either. So we're seeing some places where in some parts of the Southwest in the state, they have had almost no rain for the last 6 weeks or so. And they are really hurting, especially the ones that have no irrigation, the dryland farmers.
It's not been an easy couple of years for farmers. I mean, last year we had a brutal hurricane season, and now we go from, you know, winter freeze and snow into way too much rain in May, and now it's drought. Farmers that you talk to and people in the agriculture industry, how are they mentally hanging on this year?
That's very tough. You know, I mean, farmers have a really hard job because they have to be able to, you know, live with all these variations in the weather. And they're not only worried about the weather, but they're worried about the market, about the cost of fertilizers, about the cost of fuel. This year, you know, even being able to get the right amount of labor that they need. And so it's been very, very stressful. I think I read somewhere that the suicide rate among farmers is 3 to 4 times what it is in the general population. And it's a really sad statistic because these are the people that provide our food and our clothing. You know, that's the kind of thing that we really need to support, and it's really hard on them.
And people in Metro Atlanta may not realize, but agriculture is the #1 driver of Georgia's economy in the state. I mean, it's huge. What is it? Is it $50 billion a year? I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but it's a lot.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number either, but I know it's the number one industry in Georgia.
Now, Dr. Knox, in the metro area, we may not have as many farms, but people have their land, they have their backyards. And as you mentioned, you're not really mowing because nothing's growing, but things are getting dry. I've had bushes that have tried to die on me because it's very dry. What do you think that people around the metro area that may be in that level 1 drought and noticing how dry things are, what do they need to know about soil moisture, stream moisture, and is it okay to water right now?
Yeah, I think if you look at the Georgia EPD drought regulations, we are not in a drought. The first level of drought is usually just an educational period anyway, so we may be going into that in the future. And you might talk to the folks at EPD, like Bill Murphy, the state climatologist, about that. But people should not be watering every day. You should be watering deeply and less often so that the moisture gets down to the deep roots. And, I mean, a lot of the plants, even if they're not necessarily producing, if they're perennial plants, you are going to want to make sure that they continue to be watered so that they're healthy. Of course, trees also need water because it's a dry time of the year and they need to be able to carry over the winter. One of the issues that I'm really looking at this year is we are probably going to go into a La Nina, and in a La Nina winter, we tend to be warmer and drier than usual, especially in South Georgia, but even up here sometimes. And so that means we could see less water extending through October and even through the winter, possibly. And so that's something that people are really going to have to watch.
So in the meantime, I guess cross our fingers that maybe the Gulf opens up a little bit, maybe not with a full-blown storm, but we need some of that moisture to give us some scattered storms. Things are really getting dry out there.
Yeah, what we don't really think about is that Georgia's summer rainfall, about 30% of it comes from tropical storms. Not necessarily the storms themselves, but some sort of tropical system that brings that moisture in. And so it's been so dry this year, the tropics have been, really not very busy this year compared to what we often see this time of year, which is the peak of the tropical season. And so we're not getting any of the rain. We're not getting the moisture in from the Gulf. I think it does look like next week we're going to see some improvement in the amount of rain that we see. Not necessarily going to be a lot, but I'll tell you, sometimes you just need a little bit to help. And so I'm really watching that carefully to see if we have a switch in the pattern. But we are in the driest time of year, and so I don't see any big floods or anything like that happening. The tropics are not showing any sign of activity coming our way. It's a little too early to rule it out. I mean, we still have half the tropical season to go.
Yeah, absolutely. But in the meantime, we can cross our fingers that starting next week, we might see at least something to put a little rain in that rain gauge. Dr. Pam Knox, I really appreciate your time today.
You're welcome.